We're back. Join her. You can hear the sound of laughter. Definitely the podcast world is going to hear us once more. In studio, as always, there's always some friends to make this a little bit easier. So we have just Tanya. Hello.
Hello.
And I also have, well, let me start her list of exciting things that she does. She's a mom. She's a TikToker. She's a content creator. She said she was accidentally an activist, but now she actually is an activist. So, without any further ado, hello, Maureen Hamlin.
Hey, how are you?
Good to see you.
Yeah.
So, enjoying her, it's about diversity, it's about inclusion, it's about equity. So there's something for everyone. But today we're having a conversation, and I know it's generally something that's not spoken about, a bit taboo, sometimes put in the back seat because it's not really a comfortable conversation, but it needs to happen.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think I can say it goes without saying that, we're not experts.
No.
We're bringing what we know, stories that we perhaps grew up under the myth or maybe even just assuming that they were true, but they were not the facts either. So we will have a conversation how we see it and how we take it.
Yeah.
And maybe have a little bit of awareness and also get some different insights from each other. And you have the pleasure of tuning in. So isn't that just delightful? So, Maureen, what are we talking about?
We're talking about violence against women, as today is the 25th of November, and it's a day to highlight and to work to end violence against women. So that's the conversation we're going to have today.
Well, it's a big topic,
Yeah.
but I also think it's important.
Yeah.
The world has certainly changed from when I was a little girl.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's like for the rest of you too, but I think there's a lot more things that are scarier
Yeah.
in life that we have to deal with. So I think talking about it
Yeah.
is one of the biggest ways we can start making a bit of a difference, because there's some things we shouldn't accept. No one has to accept violence under any circumstances. And I think especially in the day and age we're living in now, it makes a difference to do something different.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Well, I think, people should get comfortable with the idea that every so often we're going to have guest features in our podcast space, especially in Join Her. And Maureen, thank you for starting us off with a conversation that's really relevant, especially with all the things that we're experiencing in the world right now. So I kind of get to take a bit of a holiday because Maureen takes over since she's the content creator, aka activist. So I get to be put in the hot seat as opposed to me taking lead on this one. So I kindly resign my seat and let you take over.
Thank you. So recently, probably a month or two ago, there was a girl in America who was approached by a guy. He asked for her number. I don't know if you heard about it. Asked for her number. She said no, and he hit her with a brick.
No.
Yeah, she filmed it, and people blamed her and said, "Why didn't you just give him the number?"
What?
And then, so it's a conversation that's still going on social media. Some people are just like, yeah, she should have given him his number, her number. And then some men have actually started using that line. If they see a woman, there was another young woman really active online speaking up against, patriarchy, and, in her comments, grown men, and she's only like, I think 19, was saying, well, you deserve a brick over your head.
No way.
Yeah, so you would think that in 2023 that this kind of thing wouldn't happen.
No.
That a woman can say, no, I don't want to give you my number, and and somebody let her get away, go
Yes,
home.
yeah.
And then there's the young girl in England who was sadly stabbed by the guy that she refused to get back with, and he was only 17 and she was only, I think, 17 as well. So violence against women is something that has been happening for a really long time, and I feel like it shouldn't be happening anymore, but it is. So I guess our first question is, what do you think is the source of violence against women? Like, why is it that women are the most, I guess, abused demographic, women and children, but generally the female child and women are the most kind of attacked verbally, physically, all over the world? Like, what do you think the source of that is? We'll start with you, Tanya.
Well, I have my personal experience, a lot of personal experience with abuse. And I get emotional immediately when I think about it. But I think it has a lot to do with that we women are, we are not as strong as men. Like our body is not as strong as men. Mentally, we're much stronger than men, but physically we're not. So I think it comes from that because my experience has told me that the men that were abusive to me, they were not abusive to everyone. It's not like Tourette, that they had Tourette and, that they couldn't help, that something, an illness, you can't help it. And yes, there are some people that are more aggressive than other. And I say people because it's not only men, but, in my case, there were men that were aggressive to me. But I think it's just because they knew they could get away with it. And that's why they did it. If it was somebody else, and maybe another woman, because the guys that have been abusive to me, they have had a history with being abusive before and after me, but not to each woman that they were in a relationship with. So I really think they know who they can victimize and who they can't. So I think that's where it comes from. It's a power thing.
Yeah.
I have the power over you, so I can do that to you.
Yeah.
So that's what I think.
What do you think, Laura? Thank you for sharing that.
Well, I mean, I look at women in general, and I think there's a lot of force that comes to a woman when she's in her full bloom, if I can call it that.
Yeah.
Having children and having to be at the defense of children. There's something, I think, instinctively that happens with women that's very defensive and very fierce about that defense. Yeah. And I think that kind of power is yet to be understood.
Yeah.
Because I don't even think we've harnessed it sufficiently to understand the implications of what it can do. I think vocally we have tried to change the way things have always been, because I think there's more we have to offer. And in us wanting to offer more, we need to talk about it more.
Yeah.
We need to be heard. And I think maybe one of the things that creates some of this tension is the idea that I need to be silenced.
Yes.
And because I need to be silenced, inadvertently invalidates me as a person. I could be seen, but I shouldn't be heard.
Yeah.
I can be seen, but I shouldn't be accepted. There's a lot of things that is in that space. And I think it's from that fear. And I think it's a coward that resorts to violence.
Yeah.
Because why would anyone use violence as a means of exercising authority over another? We can do that without having to be violent. And I think it's the viciousness of the act that suggests a threatening, silencing invalidation of a woman, so to speak. And I think there's no place for that. They shouldn't be.
Because I think it's education in the sense, like, we need to be educated, both men and women, about this. And with me, again, I can only talk about my own experience. So my father used to, and still says it, but since I was a young girl, he used to tell me, you need to know your worth. And I never understood that. And now I'm 49 years old and I'm beginning to understand it. So I think it's that we need to know our worth, so that men also know our worth and know that it's not tolerated anymore, that we won't take it anymore.
I reflected a lot because I have a love-hate relationship with men.
Yeah, me
right?
too.
So I was essayed as a little girl by male cousins, and I grew up in rural Kenya, right? So the woman was literally at the bottom of the barrel, and but I have 3 boys, right? So on one hand, I'm like, oh man, and then on the other hand, I'm like, oh, because like I'm holding future men literally in my hands every night, every day, and it got me thinking about, why I think men can get so violent. We're not saying that women do not get violent or non-binary people don't get violent, but I think the way patriarchy works
Yes.
and misogyny works is that we let boys get away with so much from a young age.
Yes.
The fact that I'm a mother of 3, I get people, you know, whenever my kids are running around, like today at Maud's, I took them to get ice cream. They were running around and people were like, oh, sure, boys will be boys,
Yeah.
you know. Or if I say, oh, I'm having a difficult time potty training, you know, I've been doing it for 2 years with one of them. And people are just like, oh, well, boys
are
take longer,
always
you know.
late. Yes.
So I feel like patriarchy allows men
Yes.
to little boys to get away with so much, and girls don't get away with as much. And we're groomed as women to accept that men are better.
Yeah.
The boys will just, you know, if a boy pulls your hair in the playground, that they
Kinda
like you, right?
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
we're just groomed to just accept these things.
Yeah.
So what role do you think child rearing and, you know, plays in that? Do women, because women give birth to men, right? So do women birth and raise patriarchy? What has your experience been, especially culturally? How has that played, you know, in your life? And I know we all come from different countries, so that would be interesting to hear.
Well, yeah, with me, everything you said, yeah, it's very familiar. I come from Dominican Republic originally, and I lived there for my first 11 years of my life. And yes, in my family, men can get away with everything. And it was normal. My grandmother from my mom's side, she loved, it seemed like it. I don't know what she was feeling, but she always put the men first, her sons and then her grandsons. And that has always stayed like that. She's still alive. She's 94 of 95.
Wow.
So it has always been like that, that men could do and get away with everything. With my own experience, I'm a mother and grandmother. Yes, I think I'm guilty of that same thing as well. Not as much as my grandmother, because I think with the generation it gets less and less, but not good enough still. I have a 30-year-old son, and yeah, I don't want to go into details things, but yeah, no, I think I let him get away with things that I maybe should have handled differently. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Well, I think where do I start? I mean, I had a father who definitely didn't play by the rules as far as culturally would have expected him to. I think I spent a lot of time with my father, and one of the things he always instilled in me was about validating me as a person. He always said I owed myself that. And he always reinforced it, because obviously I have brothers, I'm the only girl in my family. So there wasn't this gender roles for things. I mean, I would be under the car coming in the house with a greasy dress from having tried to do mechanical works with dad, to the displeasure of my mother and her screaming, she's not supposed to be there. And my father always saying, no, but she needs to be there. One day she will own a car. And the last thing we want is for her to own a car and she doesn't know how it works. So in a way, I think I look back and I appreciate my father's going against the grain, you know, letting me go away to a totally different country and kind of trusting me enough to go and find myself and be my own person. And I think in him, I learned to have the strength of character to go and pursue who me needs to be. And I think sometimes perhaps that came with a lot of conflict for men who would have had an interest in me, because I wasn't looking and being what they wanted me to be, because I would have had a very, I'm not going to do that. Why? And, you know, why would I? My father wouldn't restrict me that way, so why should you? And I think there's something about the level of liberation you have, but I think, like you so rightfully said, we have to make a difference somewhere. Somebody has to be that residual change. And I think, yes, there are a lot of things that, you know, maybe I watched my brothers get away with and felt that's not fair, and I would protest and so on and so forth. And I think equally in life, we have been conditioned to think that there's certain things that are for certain people, and certain categories of responsibility is apportioned to another person. I mean, if we said today, let's have a cup of tea, everybody would look at the woman in the room and say, yeah, you go do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's tea is tea. You know, it's made the same way. You know what I mean? So why is it that? And if it's like take notes or dictation, who's supposed to do that? Because, you know, is that the assumed thing? So I think this whole silencing and the patriarchy to some degree gets its elevation because there are still some people, dinosauric as they may be, who still like the idea of that world. I mean, the conversation we're having right now is taboo to somebody who's listening to this. Because this is not what they want to hear. And I think until we start listening to things we don't want to hear and challenging ourselves outside of what we deem as normal, because my normal is not either of yours. It's very, very different. And I think we've been structured to think normal is confined to one thing. And until we open up the potential of what normal could be, then things like violence will have no place.
So I agree. So I was in Kenya in 2017 and my granny was still alive, and there was a cousin who had gotten married since the last time I saw him. So he had a young wife and a young baby, and he was hitting her. And I was livid, right? Me and my Western ways. And, so I talked to my granny and I said, that's not acceptable. And she said, well, sometimes a woman needs to be hit in order to learn some manners.
Yes, in Dominican
And
Republic.
she said that without flinching.
Yes. In Dominican Republic, they used to say, some women ask for it. They like it. They want it. They need it. Yes.
It's crazy.
Yes, I know.
I've heard that too.
Yeah.
And I think it stems from this idea that men are superior, right? That men are better. Men are the stronger, gender, right? And I think religion has played a huge role in that. So I guess that's our next question. How have you noticed, I don't know what church background or religious background you've come from your religious background, how have you found that has played into violence against women? Because in my very Christian family, my granny, the church was built on her land, and yet she could say sometimes a woman needs to be hit, right? So she read the Bible and still thought it was okay for women to be hit. How have you found religion or Christianity or whatever you've grown up in has promoted violence against women?
I think promoting, it's for me, it's done a big word to say myself. I'm not quite there with.
That's okay.
But I do believe that the whole what is that word? Hierarchy. God, man, women, child. That says it all. That says a lot. I've been through a lot. I was brought up as Catholic, but I've been through a lot of different religions, searching for answers, and nobody can answer me a lot of questions. And I still believe there is a God, but in my own way. I do think that already, plays a role in it. The whole thing that you're not equals, that you are underneath a man. That says a lot.
No, I think for me, religion, like politics is such a conflicting thing. And I think in a lot of ways, people have made things, even if I read something right now and I gave it to somebody else to read, how I understand that and how that lands in me and what I will do as a result of what I've understood. I think there's a lot that, even if we have to sit today and say religion has to answer for, and there's pros and cons against that conversation. I'm raised in a Christian home myself equally, and I appreciate the values that it encompasses, but I'm also concerned about sometimes the person who takes this and how they interpret it and apply it to others. I think there's a real danger here where what I think and what I feel and what I deem is necessary or whatever, things take on a personality of the translator of what I've understood. And I think that's where some of the issues have come from, because I could see it from a totally different cultural context.
Yeah.
And with all of us having different cultural contexts here, what I've understood to be done and not to be done, and vice versa, is very relative.
Yeah.
And I think it's such a fluid position that is not clear and crystallized in a defined way. So people have, in some degree, abused the values that were supposed to be in the purest form. They've been, changed to suit somebody else rather than what they were created for in the first place.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of conflicted with that, because a lot of times, how do you judge the better or the worse of something if not by the products and the results?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
The actions of the people who are consuming that thing, right? And I feel like, as I have a master's in theology, so I'm very, I again, love-hate relationship. I love the church and I hate the church. I've walked away and I haven't walked away, like I'm really conflicted. But I grew up hearing, just pray more. Just pray more for your husband who just hit you. Pray more for your husband who is sleeping with everybody, right? Pray more for, I have an aunt-in-law who got HIV/AIDS from her husband, who, stuff like that. And yet, she just had to pray more. And so when I got married, there was a lady that gave me a book full of prayers for the praying wife. And literally, I wasn't angry in her face, but when I went home, I was like, oh. Because I'm like, I am not praying if he's not praying, So I'm rebellious in that way, and I can see the harm that has been done. And I think when I did my master's in theology, looking at biblical languages and understanding actually that the man was never the head of the woman in the way we understand it, and that umbrella of authority, that's only that was only brought in by Goddard, I can't remember his name, in the 60s. So this umbrella where there's Christ and then the man and then the woman and then the children. And the disturbing thing for me is the children, according to the guy that created that umbrella, were the managers of the home. And to me, that is parentification at its best, and parentification is abuse, right? How can a child who hasn't even had their frontal lobe formed properly be a manager of the home? And it was to allow men to get away with a form of Christianity, evangelicalism, where the man is the head and the woman and the children, and it's really, really disturbing. But in the Bible, the more I read and the more I look at cultural context and look at the original languages, man and woman were created equal. It even says that itself. And it's interesting, the whole story about the rib being taken out of Adam, like it was taken from the side, which means for me it's equal. But when God builds the woman, he uses the same word that he uses to build the temple. And that for me was just like that just means like she's like amazing, right? It wasn't an afterthought. And then not to get sermony here, not to preach, but I think another thing that really changed for me was whenever the children of Israel come out of Egypt, they're called to be priests, both men and women. So before there's this hierarchy and whatever, both men and women are treated the same. And that's the freedom for me now. When I read the Bible, I look for that freedom where women are liberated and we're not under, the man. We just want to take our rightful place. But I think the church, like you said, has done so much damage by allowing these thoughts of like the man is the head, the woman, and because of that, then women think that they cannot speak up. They think that they just have to take it. They just need to
that
pray.
we are less.
That we're less than, but we're not.
No, I know.
I think it's hard. I think there's something about humanity and having superiority and some sort of control and ownership and management. Those are really big things. I mean, I think if you're talking business, it's relevant because there's some profit that comes out of it. But whatever happened about doing the right thing and being the, do unto others as you would like done unto yourself. It's very cliche to say that, but I think it's important. And what I think and what I want could
Yeah.
work for me.
Yeah.
But I don't have to make it what you want either if it's
Yeah.
not for you. I think we need to give each other room to be
Yeah.
whoever we want to be,
Yeah.
and also giving allowance that we will have times where we do not agree.
Yeah.
But because we do not agree, or I have a preference, or vice versa,
Yeah.
I think sometimes ego
Yeah.
is probably the biggest enemy of us
Yeah.
all, because ego needs to be satisfied and fed and exonerated a certain kind of way. And I think that is probably our biggest enemy, more than it is the person who's sitting in front of you, because how much ego and worth does that person have, or lack of,
Yeah.
that creates this monster in
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
So I think, good old fashioned Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if we must,
Yes.
there's better ways to be.
But I think that the whole aggression against women comes from our history. We come from a lot of aggression and beating up, in the past as slaves first, and from the master, and then, but we have seen that everywhere. Also in here in Northern Ireland at schools, my husband used to, kids got them beaten up at school by their teachers, and
Punishment life,
at
wasn't it?
school in Dominican Republic it was the same. I got never beaten up because I was a good kid. But like terrible punishments, like putting the kids on their knees in the sun, or parents. I've heard of it. I've never seen it, thank goodness. But putting them in un cuello, how do you like a grater on their knees. I used to be put in a corner by my mom on my knees, not in the sun, in the house if I was naughty.
Yeah.
So it was a common thing, or beaten up with a belt. That was a common thing, and that was normal. And I don't feel like I was abused because I don't know any better. It was, and I knew that other parents were so much worse. So we had it very good in our house, and to come back on the whole boy thing, I was raised like I was never allowed to go out and play because I was a girl. I needed to be protected, and that's the way. And I do see it as protection because, like you say, you mentioned something about your cousins and so on. So my mom had some stories, and so she grew up with wanting to protect her daughters. So I wasn't allowed to do anything. But behind that was also not only protecting me from those men that could do things, and my brother was allowed to go anywhere, and do anything. But also you have to be a virgin when you go out the door. I grew up, but I'm old. This is not happening anymore. I think in Dominican Republic, things have progressed. I'm 49 years old, but that I'm just trying to say where we're coming from, and things have gotten better, but we are not there. I mean, we have a long, long way to go. But I do think that things are progressing slowly.
You said something really interesting about how you wouldn't have considered that abuse because you didn't know any better. And it's true, whatever we normalize, we just accept, right? And I saw women being beaten all the time as a little girl, and children being beaten, and for the most part, I thought it was just the norm. But there were a few times when, I've always been a loudmouth. I guess I've always been an activist, because I remember at 5 years old, my aunt-in-law hitting my cousin for no reason. To me, I was just because I was she didn't do anything. If she had done something else, I think I might have been oh, okay, she deserved it. But she hadn't done much, and her mom just turned and and I was just why would you do that? And I sat there rocking her back and forth and crying with her, and everybody just laughed at me. I was too sensitive. So I do think that yes, there was a lot of kind of stuff that was normalized that I accepted, but there was stuff that I spoke up about. But even as an adult, before I had kids, I hadn't decided if I was gonna hit them or not. And that shows me how much I had internalized that hitting was okay.
Yeah.
And then I had kids and I was like, no, I don't want to do that. You know, but we normalize so much
Yes.
of abuse that we just accept it.
Yeah.
We just accept it. But the more we start to question, why do we hit people? Why does a woman need a beating? Why does a child need a beating? Can we not just talk to them? Can we, you know, is there a way to discipline that doesn't require aggression? Then maybe, like you said, things can start to get better.
But I do think that even though, you know, because I come from generations of abuse. So I think even though you know, the aggression is within you. If you have been beaten, I think it's because I have a small kid, 8 years old, and I don't tend to hit him, but sometimes smack on the head, like a tick on the head, and then. He said, because he gets very emotional. He's a new kid. He's not from my generation. He's like, they are different. They are wired different. He goes, and comes to me, why did you do that to me? I'm like, my goodness, he comes like I have, you know, totally abused him. Yeah. And I'm thinking by myself, oh no, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. Yeah. But at the same time, my God, you would never survived in my generation. I mean, because kids nowadays, they can't handle anything. But I think that's a good thing. That's a good thing that he confronts me with it. He comes up to me and says, why would you do that to me? I'm like, what did I do? But because then you get confronted. Sometimes you do things that you don't even, you know.
And that's something that we didn't have the luxury.
Oh, no. I would...
The luxury to speak up.
No,
like,
never.
You obeyed out of fear, like I did, right?
I'm still terrified of my mom. No, seriously, this is no joke. I'm no laughing matter. I'm still terrified of my mom.
Yeah.
Terrified of my mom. And she's a tiny wee woman. I'm a tiny wee woman, and she's even smaller and thinner than me. Yeah. But I'm terrified. It's just how you are brought up.
Yeah.
There is this fear.
Yeah. Of authority.
Of authority. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I almost wonder, you know, if TikTok existed in our day,
girl,
what would we have the world see right now? Because I'm actually thinking about the different scenarios, even just listening to the two of us, and if we actually sat down, if TikTok could be taken way back then, we would have a whole different caseload of things to deal with in the present right now. And I think we need to question ourselves. Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of us are afraid of, you know, do I need to go and have counseling? Do I need to have therapy?
I think everybody needs.
Do I need to explore, you know, why I'm a certain way? You know, so I think
I
it's
don't
learning.
want to. Oh, that's a Pandora box that I don't want to.
It's actually
seriously. So, I don't think I couldn't handle it.
Well, you know, some
once you open that door, oh no.
But then, so you talked about rage. You talked about, like, you know, how sometimes you get annoyed.
Yeah,
right?
Not rage. No, not rage.
Okay,
it's
just a bit
angry.
of annoyance. Okay. I have rage, and
I have rage. Yes,
and
but
rage
not
stems from a lot of repressed anger.
Yes.
So as a child, because I wasn't allowed to express myself, right? When my kids are expressing themselves, I literally sometimes have to be like sit on my hands and start. So I've been to therapy, so I have some coping skills. I go to a 12-step group, and so I have lots of coping tools. But sometimes I have to sit on my hands and just breathe and just be like, you know, and it's a lot of rage, you know, because I wasn't allowed to express anger and emotions and sadness and, you know, all of that. So mentioning therapy, I would recommend. I think everybody, this is just me, by the age of 25 should go to therapy. If you're thinking of being in a relationship, especially men, because they're not allowed to be sad as little boys,
Yes,
because
yeah.
big boys don't
Don't cry,
right?
yeah.
So their sadness is expressed as anger, and actually that's seen as more acceptable for them, right? If a man is angry, it's like, it's okay. But they need to be sad. They need to process all of that, and a lot of them were not allowed to cry.
Well,
my husband remembers the last time he cried. He was 4 years old, and he did cry when one of our babies was born.
Yeah.
I've seen him cry maybe twice.
I feel sorry for
that,
husband.
No, no,
It's
no.
the secret's
Right.
out.
No.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So, and he, for him, he didn't see a problem with it, but now he's just like, oh, maybe, So I think therapy will help you like get all that stuff out, and
That's what
12-step
I'm afraid
groups,
of.
so that we can process all that stuff. And I think if men were able to be sad, to be angry in a healthy way, they would be less aggressive to women.
Yes.
I think that is one of the.
Well, then what do we say about the stereotypical, that's an angry black woman? Come
that's
on.
what I wanted to get to, because
it doesn't happen.
that's why
It
I
doesn't
wanted
happen.
to
But
interrupt you,
so
because it's for both. You mentioned that because was it you that said, I'll give you something to be sad about.
Oh, yeah.
I heard that my whole life. It's like, how dare you open your mouth or cry. My crocodile tears. My mom said to me once, she only had to say it once.
Yeah.
I never ever cried again in front of my mom, because she says, don't come to me with your crocodile tears.
And that's not healthy
And I said,
either. And that's why I said everybody needs therapy. By the age of 25, especially if you're considering, marriage, relationships, children, whatever. And the black woman, we know there's a hierarchy, right?
Yeah.
So we know it's the white man, the white woman, the black man, the black woman. And the black woman gets it from every single person.
Yeah.
So you're dealing with racial abuse, you're dealing with domestic violence, you're dealing with, there's a guy, I keep seeing him on all these under these videos with his comments, and his comment always is, the black woman is what's wrong with the black family.
No.
Right?
Excuse
so,
me.
Yeah, but I empathize with him. I'm not saying he's right, but he probably has a really abusive mother, right? So black women have held it down for generations on every continent, right? You look at in Africa, right? That when colonialism happened, the men were taken away, and slavery, the black woman in America couldn't even marry officially, right? She was raped, she was abused, she had to do all this work. So she has a lot of repressed labor in the Caribbean.
Where
The black women have suffered so much.
Yeah.
And in this day and age, most black women are single mothers, right? And they're having to deal with racist co-workers. They're having to deal with black men calling them whatever. They're having to send money back to their countries or support a whole group of people. Like, is it any wonder that she's angry and she's never allowed to express her sadness, and she's never allowed to meet her needs? But if she starts going to therapy, if she starts going to 12-step group, she starts to look after herself, she can process all that emotion.
But I also think, we're allowed to be angry.
Yeah.
I think when you've had to, if I sat down and I thought about my whole ancestral history to make me up, there's ancestors I will never get to know. Part of my DNA that is lost somewhere. It could be at the bottom of the ocean. Lord knows at this point. But I think anger has its own place as much as happiness does.
Yeah, but it's how we express it. Right?
Exactly. And I think the worst kind of anger I almost feel is it's like a dormant volcano.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's not a volcano anymore. It's just waiting for the day where it's just going to erupt, and
Because
we all
it's
know how that
repressed.
works. Yes. So I think it's also being able to articulate that just because somebody doesn't say ouch often enough, somebody doesn't say back off, step off, or whatever. And naturally, I think sometimes even in most of our communities, we don't have the right to be confrontational.
Yeah.
We're supposed to just accept a lot of things. So the right to be confrontational, to raise the questions. And then when we do raise the questions, we're a disruptor. We're we're accepting or we're affecting the balance of happiness for everyone. And I'm not entitled to feed into my own feelings as if I have to invalidate them. So there is anger in that space because there's a lot of things perhaps we want to say.
Yeah.
But given the room, the time, the space to say them and articulate them the way I feel it's exercised. And then sometimes, as lovely as therapy can be, I think we also need to make sure we're getting the right therapist.
Oh,
Because if
Girl.
you've got the wrong therapist,
let me tell you, I've had horrible therapists,
Yeah.
and especially so now. I haven't been in a while, but I was seeing a mixed race woman, so she understood the racial trauma so beautifully. But the person before her was a white woman, and she gaslit the hell out of me whenever I was talking about what my in-laws had done. You know, I'm married to a white guy, and she just kept being, you know, she just kept saying, "Oh, well, they didn't mean it that way." But how do you know?
Yeah.
How do you say that black people cannot rule themselves and they didn't mean it that way? Like it wasn't.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
But she couldn't see it.
Yeah.
So that's why you're right. I think if you're going to therapy, it's important to get somebody who can validate your experience. And that's why we need more black therapists. We need people of color who understand racial trauma, who understand what it's like to not be allowed to speak.
But I agree with you. Therapy is it's very good tool, but I think we can do a lot of work ourselves. I think you can learn to reflect on your patterns, because at some point, like I said, I come from a history of violence. Oh, so at some point I asked myself, what's going on? Why do I keep repeating the same cycle? So, and then asked, how do I get out of this? So I think women can do that, and men. I mean, men can ask themselves, why am I doing this? Where is this anger coming from? Where, you know, and why am I taking it out on, you know, because like I said, about me with Vincent, for example, if I get angry and do something or say something that I don't mean at that moment, I can always go back and say, oh no, sorry, that wasn't for you, love.
Yeah.
You know, and I literally say that to my 8-year-old. I look at me in the eye, I'm sorry, love. Has nothing to do with you. It's all me. Mama is tired, and I'm thinking about things that has nothing to do with you. So I do.
And
I think you're
respect that.
striking a nerve. I mean, just listening to both of you. You know, this thing about acknowledging you're exhausted, acknowledging I need a timeout.
Yeah.
I think as adults, it's like we're not given permission to have a timeout because we're grown-ups.
Yeah.
We're supposed to take ownership of what's happening. And I think the funny thing about being a parent is your child becomes all the things that perhaps you wished for or hoped for or needed or wanted. And I wonder ever so slightly, are we a little bit envious of the liberties and the freedoms they have? So it triggers us in a way like, oh, I wanted to do that and I can't get that. And we look at their joy and inadvertently we stifle it, not because we don't want them to be happy, but there's a part of us that's still, you know, I think I saw this article and a really good poetry piece where there's the adult female, but she's looking in the mirror and she's seeing a younger version of herself in the mirror. And I think one of the captions to that was about talk to your inner self. What would you tell her if you had an opportunity to speak to her, to bring her to be who you are in present? And I think that just goes to what you're saying about we need to sometimes do the remedial reflective work. It's difficult, it's challenging, and sometimes, you know, to be held and say I'm sorry, to cry and allow that to be exercised. And we need to find better partners if we're not finding them. Who can embrace the level and depth that whether it's in that relationship a woman brings to the table, because we all have stories.
And
just to get back to what you were saying, very few people can reflect.
Yeah, I know.
Because they have no self-awareness.
I know.
Right? And that's why we need, that's why, you know, I'm a big supporter of therapy, right? If you can do the work yourself, great. And I know it's expensive, right? £45 an hour in a lot of places. It's a lot.
It's a
right?
lot of money.
So I'm not saying go broke, whatever. If you can self-reflect, great. If you can go to a 12-step group, great. Whatever you can do it. But sometimes you need, because we got hurt by people, we heal with people. So I used to do the work by myself. And then I realized that I was stuck there with places that I just could not, you know, kind of push through. And now being in community in my 12-step groups, I'm in an amazing one of people of color all over the world, you know, with addiction. But we look at racism as well, because racism is like a toxic family system.
Yes.
So it's been so healing. I thought I had worked through my racial trauma, and now I'm just like, and somebody says something, and I'm like, oh, so yeah, we need, let's do the reflecting, but we also need other people, whatever that looks
Yes,
like.
with
And it
it.
could just be conversation with
Yeah.
fellow women. And I think you had said something, and now I've forgotten what you had said. I really wanted to kind of jump on that.
I think there's so much.
Yes,
So much. to it.
I think and coming back to what you're doing,
Yeah.
and like what I said with Vincent, I do that with my husband as well, because with my husband I have a very good relationship with my husband, but we have been through a lot, because before that I came out of relationships that were like really toxic, like really bad. I'm not gonna go into it, but a lot of things that you cannot even imagine. And then going into a healthy relationship, I didn't know what that was. So, and you get like addicted to the drama and the conflict. So I think I tried to get drama and things, but my husband was he's very stable. He doesn't argue. He's non-confrontal. But he is a person that doesn't like any kind of confrontation. So I would be arguing with myself, which would get me even more angry sometimes. But yes, but no, this was a conscious decision to get out of. I didn't want that kind of relationships anymore. But I wanted to say he is a person that is stable and doesn't fight, but he didn't know anything about self-reflection. He's still like in baby steps. We know each other now for 12 years, and he's just starting, and he's learning through me how to self-reflect. And because I have sat them down and, okay, love, you're almost perfect. You're a good man, but you need to be able to look back and see what your own thing is in this. So yeah, I think we women, because we are the smart ones, and we are
she's gone for it now.
we are the smart ones and the powerful ones.
This is not joint.
It's a joke. People don't take it too seriously. But I do think that you can bring along not only your kids but your partner as well in this journey
Only as
that
much
you're
as
in.
they want to go.
Just as much.
Yeah.
No, because you can talk to him
Yeah.
about it. Like I said, my husband, it's been 12 years of me talking.
12 step. Right, there you go.
Yeah, there you go.
And now he decided himself to like take this journey. You can't make anybody doing anything they don't want.
But I think in everything you're saying, it's about ownership.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
think one of the biggest liberating things that maybe we don't hear often enough is I'm responsible for me.
Yes.
And that's
My emotions.
And
that-
exactly.
That's another thing I learned. The only way that someone can own something, because a lot of times we just reflecting is very difficult. Like you said, it's like you have to step out of yourself and look at your back from a helicopter. Let's say. That's the way I see it, like from a distance. And that's very hard. And even if we are able to do it, we are never able to see the full picture.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about physical violence, and for the longest time I thought that was the only violence against women. I didn't understand or even know that emotions could be used to manipulate you and to abuse you. I didn't realize that finances could be used, against you and to abuse you or lack thereof. So what has been your experience like, and what's your understanding of other types of violence, in general?
Well, like I said, I have a lot of experience with different types of violence. And what I've noticed in my own, what I've been through, is that it doesn't start with physical violence. It starts very slow and you wouldn't notice it. Like they loved me so much that they would be jealous about not only men around me, my friends, my male friends, but also girlfriends. Like, they would be possessive. And that was something that I grew up with, thinking that that was a good thing, if the man was possessive, and if the man was jealous, that oh, he must love me so much, because he doesn't want to share me with anyone. So that was a misconception. Now I know that, but back then it was like a compliment, even, to be that the guy would feel that for me. So I think that's how it starts. It's very, very subtle. It's not even with jealousy, outrage. It doesn't start with that. It's subtle, like, oh, wouldn't you like to stay with me instead, or go out with me, or I want to, be with you tonight, that sort of thing. And before you know it, that was my experience anyway, I was very isolated from my friends, from my family even. And well, I got to a point that I wanted to be isolated because there was so much things happening that I didn't want anybody to know about, the shame and how you got into that situation. But it starts very subtle with love and
Oh yeah, no, you're both talking, and I'm just kind of thinking love bombing.
Yes,
that's
yes,
usually
that's
what
the-
happens.
yeah.
Because you're so overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's like a whirlwind. It's like a captivating experience, and before you know it, you're sucked in. It's like this invisible black hole that you get sucked into, and once you're in, I think, what is that movie? Get Out.
Right.
But the only thing is, there isn't a cup of tea being stirred to get you in that space, and I think that's what happens. And I think there's a piece about being able to have emotions and what to do with them. I think we need to be taught that, because I think when I was a child, it was about being seen and not heard. So how I felt about being seen and not being heard, or any of that stuff, you never got a chance to process that. And then you grow up, and all of a sudden, how can all of this be unseen now?
Right.
It's visible everywhere. So what do I do now that I can be seen when I used to have to be quiet all the time? So now I have to verbalize my existence in some shape or form. And in that speaking up and verbalizing my existence, there's a lot of emotions for me going on, and there's a lot of things I'm having to unpack. So I think you hit it in the head. It's isolation. If you think about it, any game that suggests there has to be a winner, you have to take away all the defenses, isn't it? And the defenses through love bombing, you're so overwhelmed, the flowers, the jewelry, the candy, the activities, where do you have time to think this is awful? By the time you realize how awful it is, you could have other injuries that are not always physical, that go beyond that, because broken bones and things can heal. But emotional work is not visible. It's invisible. And I think that's where, maybe because of how women are made, we're emotional anyway. So I suppose the best part to us sometimes is perceived to be the weakest part of us, but it's not. It's actually the most powerful part if we know what to do with it. And we know how to tap into it. And we need to have more confidence to defend feeling and being who we are in full. And I think that is part of the problem, because we don't get that liberation to own me fully.
And that starts in childhood. It starts in childhood when you don't allow your child to express themselves. When, for example, in my culture, it's big where you have to eat everything on your plate. And sometimes they have a stick, waiting for you to, and if you say you're full, well, it doesn't matter,
And it's well intended. It's well intended, because all they want to do is feed you. Like, they don't want you to miss out. So it's
so like forcing them to eat, never allowing them to say no, never allowing them to, like, for example, a big one that I see a lot now when it's coming up to the holidays is they don't have to hug a relative. If they don't want to hug them, right? But it's, I grew up being told, just say hello. Like, why aren't you saying hello? And sometimes the people that I didn't want to say hello to were not nice people, right? So not allowing your child to know who they are, to know what they like, to know what their rights are, to know that they can express themselves. So I grew up thinking that my no wasn't valid. For example, for me, I dated terribly. Like, I own it. dated terribly. I had an absent mother, and I never met my dad. So there were so many needs that were not met. My love needs were not met. So if somebody thought I was pretty,
you're gorgeous, by the way.
Like, you know, like that was it. That's all it took for them to think I was pretty.
Yeah.
You know, and then, you know, I fell, you know, for just people who gave me the bare minimum. Like, it's just like, now I look back, I'm like, oh my God. But it's because so many needs were not met as a child. So when somebody comes along and they're offering me something remotely like close to like what I think love is, I fell for it. So I think the way we raise girls and boys, right? I'm raising boys. I don't have girls, but the way we raise children is going to determine how they date, who they date. And the way we raise boys is if we teach them that they're entitled now, when they're 4 or 5, you know, 7, 2, you know, I'm speaking about my boys, you know, if they have a toy, if somebody has a toy and the other one wants it, and I'm just like, oh, just give it to him, he's the youngest,
like
right? So he thinks he's entitled to everything. So the thing I do, for example, when it comes to sharing, I say, okay, when your brother's finished with it, just say to him, when you're finished with it, can I have a go? Right? And then if somebody, like one of them likes to hug and they want to force hug everybody, and the other one of them doesn't want to be hugged, I tell them, no is a good word. Like we have a song that says no is a good word. And I'm like, I'm thinking of future people, right? Women, men, whoever they're going to be into, right? When they're dating, if somebody says no, I don't know how many times I said no on a date and I kept being pressured into it. Do you know what I mean? The emotional, and so many times I was told, well, if you like me or if you love me. And then I fell for it. But I didn't want to do it. And then because you found yourself in that situation, right? And it ends up being date rape or whatever, then you think it's your fault. But actually you didn't consent. You never really consented. You said no, and your no wasn't respected. And I think we need to teach men from a very young age, little boys, that you're not entitled to that toy. You get it when the person that's playing with it is finished. If they don't want to be hugged, they don't want to be hugged, right? If you don't want to be hugged, you don't have to be hugged. And so then when they grow up and they're dating, if the woman or the man says no, they're going to respect that because they've learned it from a young age.
Well, then I must have been super feisty.
Because,
I remember being told I must have been 12. And, you know, when you have one of those uncles who thinks he can get away with anything and he's like, you know, everybody loves this kind of character. So, you know, when you're 12, you're a young girl just establishing yourself as a person, and he thought it would be cute to try and, I don't know, was it a hug or something that was really sleazy? And I was just like, excuse me? And I like pushed him off and I like full on slapped a grown man.
Oh, I love it.
And I was pleasantly surprised at how much rage I had to exhibit in that very moment and kind of in defense for myself.
Good for you.
To watch, you know, when you're like at a family gathering, this is unheard of.
Reaction.
You know, so it's almost like, you know, like the shock horror moment. But I think, again, when I think back to all of these moments, having Dad be the person who he was.
We love you, Dad.
You know,
on behalf of all of us who didn't have a dad.
You know, my dad was perfect.
Perfect. To me, I suppose, superhero doesn't need to be a guy in a cape. You know, there are some good men out there who do have the right values, who will grow up and be the right kind of reflection of what is good and what is right, and all the protection and all of those things. And I think I remember him kind of pulling me aside. You know how the whole family's, oh my God, da, 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 and the chaos, and my father just kind of coming in, and my grandfather just as much saying, what did you do? What did you do
or to him?
To me? Because it was like, my grandfather especially was like, what did you do? Because under normal circumstances, she does not react like that. So what did you do
to
him?
Oh, thank God. Okay.
To him.
Yeah.
Like, what did you do? Because she would not respond like this under any normal circumstances. So what did
we
you
love you,
do?
Granddad, too.
You know, he's late now, but my grandfather, I suppose, these superheroes are. And I think
that's good for
any man can take up that role to be the difference that is needed. Even in our families. And I think that's what if I dare say it, woman needs. People who will believe her, accept what she is saying, see that she's in distress. She doesn't necessarily always need to cry. But as humans, we can tell when something is not right. So why don't we tune into that, respond to that, and even as mothers, be in defense for our kids in that way.
Yes. Yeah.
Because our daughters are exposed to so much.
Yes.
And if you're not advocating to speak up, to show up, to be there for them, who's going to do it?
Yeah.
So I kind of look at, there's so much that our cultures that kind of is good and is bad and it's sweet and it's sour and it's a rock and a hard place. I mean, there's so many things, but at the same time, as crazy as the time was for us to be who we are today, it's in all of that insanity, the strength of character, we have it in this moment to be where we are, to say what we're saying, and to have the level of conviction of saying, you can be that residual difference, but you have to do the work. And you have to identify, you have to call on others if you need to say, look, I think I'm blindsided. Help me see what I can't see. And sometimes don't take everything personally, because sometimes in taking everything so personally, you stifle your own growth. You self-sabotage the potential of yourself because you're not prepared to go and have or explore what you need to see in a different light. So yeah, this is challenging.
So, yes,
This
what
is not
a conversation.
Easy. Yeah.
And I think we still have more questions, but we're going to end it because this
We
is
could
quite
go
long.
on
We
for
could go
days.
on. But I
Yeah.
guess as we end it, what is the one thing that you really want to get out there? Like, if today was your last day on earth and this was a topic you needed to talk about, what would you like people to know?
Ooh, that's a hard one.
Yeah.
For me, it would be if somebody is in the situation that I was in many times years ago, I would say to myself to run, to get away, not look back. Don't think about, but we are so many years together and we've been through so much together and we have kids, and just get away, and there is a future out there and it's better. That's what I would say.
Well, I would say be brave enough to see that you're worth everything. You're worth everything. You know, it doesn't matter how you started. It's what you do in this moment right now and where you're going. Because so many of us are held back by the titles, the labels, and things that have been said to us. And some of those things were only because they were afraid of the potential they could see.
Okay.
You know? So for me, it's like, be brave to own all of yourself. And even the parts that you think need to be put in the garbage. Because you know what? When you get a diamond today, a diamond doesn't start as a diamond. It's just a horrible piece of stone that doesn't have any worth at all until you smash it up and really get to the epicenter. And there you find enclosed in all of this very unattractive exterior, the best part. So, you know, you are that diamond. But be brave enough to understand you're worth it. Do the work. Even if it hurts, cry through the tears, fight it all, whatever you need to do. There's a diamond inside there worth finding.
And I think for me, I think it's to say that it's never too late. It's never too late to unlearn what you were taught. If you're a man watching this, it's never too late to break the generational trauma of violence or lack of respect for women. You can be the person that changes that. And if you're a woman and you've grown up and you're carrying the trauma of the women that went ahead of you, it's never too late. Like, you can change that, you can unlearn, you can do the work. And you do not have to stay, like Tanya said, you do not have to stay in a toxic marriage or toxic relationship. You can leave, and there is life. It's actually better, so much better. Lonelier sometimes, because a lot of people are still living in their trauma, but better, so much better, and I wouldn't have it any other way. So thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you.
For having this conversation.
Yes.
And here's to many more.
Yes.
Most definitely. So I guess
Cheers.
if you
With water.
didn't hear it first, they want us to wash it down with some water. It's water. Till next time.